Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are taking a custom-tailored journey, one made specifically for you, the listener, into a really fascinating philosophical essay and its accompanying poem.
Yeah, it's called Time and Prayer and Conversation of the Heart.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to look closely at the profound psychological and spiritual mechanics of ritual prayer.
Which is referred to in the text as namaz or salat or salat.
Exactly. But we aren't looking at this as, a checklist of religious duties.
No, not at all.
Instead, we're going to unpack it as a radical, intentional interruption to the overwhelming flow of modern life. We're exploring how it acts as a vital tool for reclaiming our center.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It really is. So, okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever had that feeling when it's suddenly 10 p.m., you're staring at the ceiling and you just think to yourself, where did I go today?
Oh, absolutely.
Not what did I do or what tasks did I cross off the list, but where did my mind actually go?
It is very specific, almost dizzying kind of modern vertigo.
Yes, vertigo is the perfect word for it.
Because you've been in constant motion for, 16 straight hours? Making decisions, answering messages, putting out fires.
And yet you feel like you haven't actually arrived anywhere.
Exactly. And the essay we're looking at today introduces this exact phenomenon with a very striking, simple premise.
What does it say?
It just states, a human being flows.
A human being flows.
Yeah. And what the author means by that is we move without stopping, without reflecting, and often without even noticing because we're so heavily burdened by distractions and demands.
So the text is arguing that our default state is basically just being swept along by the current.
Pretty much, yeah.
We wake up, there's this immediate sense of urgency, and then the sheer weight of the day just takes over.
And that ties right back to that 10 p.m. feeling you mentioned.
Right, asking where did I go today? It's just wild to think that we can live thousands of days in our lifetimes and completely lose track of the vast majority of them because we're just, drifting.
Precisely. The text actually poses that exact question about where we went. It notes that rarely does a person stop long enough to ask it while the day is actually happening.
We only ask when it's too late.
Right. And the reason we feel that deep disconnect at the end of the night is rooted in a core principle from the essay. The author makes a crucial distinction here.
Which is?
Movement is not the same as direction.
Wow, movement is not the same as direction. That is such a clarifying way to put it.
It really changes how you view a busy schedule.
It makes me think of being caught in river rapids, or maybe, to use a more everyday example, running on a treadmill.
Oh, a treadmill is a great analogy.
Because you're moving incredibly fast, your heart rate is up, you're expending massive amounts of energy, but you aren't actually choosing a path.
You're just trying your hardest not to fall off the belt.
Exactly. You're doing a lot of work, but your location in the universe hasn't changed.
That perfectly visualizes the problem the text is highlighting. And to diagnose that problem, the essay gives us this brilliant quote. It says, "The one who is inside the flow rarely perceives the flow itself."
Oh, because they're too busy surviving it?
Right. When you are tumbling down those river rapids, all you see is the water immediately crashing over your head. You don't see the shape of the river.
You don't see where the current is heading or, if a waterfall's coming up.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of ritual prayer enters the framework of the essay. It isn't described merely as an obligation to fulfill.
What is it described as?
It's described as a structured, ritualistic pause. It's a fundamental reorientation. Simply put, it's a command to stop.
But wait a second, looking at this from the perspective of someone who lives and dies by their calendar app, in our modern world, we equate stopping with unproductivity.
We do. We see it as a failure, almost.
Right. If you and I are so incredibly busy tackling the demands of the day, answering emails, meeting deadlines, keeping the household running, isn't stopping 3 or 4 or 5 times a day just a recipe for falling hopelessly behind?
It seems like it would be.
Because doesn't the treadmill just throw you off if you stop moving your feet?
What's fascinating here is how the text completely flips that modern assumption on its head.
Really? How so?
Well, the assumption is that if we stop, we lose our momentum. But the essay argues the exact opposite. It says when a person never pauses, they lose themselves.
They lose themselves.
Yeah. The deep wisdom of this practice is that it, and I'm quoting the essay directly here, catches the human being in the act of drifting away.
Catches them in the act. I love that.
Think about the mechanics of a typical day. A person becomes scattered. Your attention is pulled in 100 different directions.
Your mind fragment.
Right, your heart grows heavy with the stress of it all. So the purpose of this pause isn't to distract you from your day or make you less productive. It's to actively gather what has been scattered by all those fragments.
Oh, I see. So it isn't an escape hatch to run away from your responsibilities.
Not at all.
It's a gathering mechanism. You're collecting the pieces of your attention that you've left scattered across 10 different meetings and 3 different social media feeds.
Exactly. It calls the human being back to their center. It reminds you that you aren't just meant to exist as a reaction to external stimuli. You are meant to be oriented.
So how do you actually do that?
Well, the text breaks this pause down into 3 very distinct, highly intentional steps.
Okay, what are they?
First, stop and step out of the current. Second, stop and look at yourself. Third, stop and remember what you are doing.
Step out, look, remember. That sequence makes total sense because you physically cannot look at yourself clearly if you're still tumbling down the rapids.
You're just trying to breathe at that point.
Right. You have to get onto the riverbank first, dry off, and catch your breath before you can even assess the situation.
Exactly.
But if we just rely on our own willpower to step out of the rapids, we'll never do it. The flow will always convince us that now isn't a good time to stop.
It always feels like a bad time to stop.
Which leads to the timing of these pauses. The text reveals that these interruptions aren't random at all, right?
No, the timing is not arbitrary. It is deeply connected to the human journey itself. The structure actually forces the pause exactly when you are most likely to be swept away.
And usually when you and I divide our time, we do it almost entirely by external obligations.
Oh yeah, calendar invites, deadlines.
Right, we say, okay, 9 a.m. is the marketing meeting, 12 p.m. is lunch, 3 p.m. is the school pickup, 6 p.m. is dinner. It's a total spreadsheet view of life.
We just divide the day based on what we owe to other people.
Or to our bosses, or just our basic biological needs. So how does this text reframe that daily schedule? Like, how does it take us from a spreadsheet of tasks into something that holds actual meaning?
It does it by tying the pauses directly to the shifting nature of the day, and by extension, the shifting nature of a human life.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The text breaks down the specific times of prayer and assigns a profound psychological state to each one. It isn't just about what time it is on the clock. It's about what is happening to the human psyche at that moment.
So what are the states?
Let's walk through them. It starts with dawn. This represents a beginning. It's the quiet awareness of a life newly given, before the demands of the world have even started.
Oh, it's that fleeting moment of potential before the noise of the spreadsheet kicks in.
Precisely. You are establishing your center before the current starts pulling.
That makes sense. What's next?
Then comes midday. The text describes this as remembering with an intensity.
Remembering with an intensity.
Yeah, it's an awakening right in the middle of our forgetfulness. Midday is when the flow is at its absolute strongest.
Right. It's noon, the emails are piling up, the stress is peaking.
And you are entirely focused on the external world. So this pause forces a break right at the peak of the intensity.
Man, if you're listening to this right now and you work in a high-pressure environment, think about how radical it is to physically step away from your desk at 12:30 p.m.
It's almost unheard of.
Not to go get a sandwich and keep working, but to completely disconnect from the urgency of the moment, to wash up and to reset your mental state. You're actively breaking the spell of the workday.
Breaking the spell is a great way to describe it.
And after midday.
Next is the afternoon. And the phrasing the author uses here is beautifully poignant. The afternoon represents the weight of passing time.
The weight of passing time.
And the quiet approach of finitude.
Quiet approach of finitude. Wow, that is a heavy concept, but so relatable.
It really is.
Because it's that classic 3 p.m. feeling. The shadows start getting a little longer, you realize the day is slipping away, your energy is dipping, and you suddenly realize you cannot get those hours back.
Right, the day is ending and you haven't accomplished everything you wanted to.
Exactly.
It's an acknowledgement of our limits. Time is limited and we are limited.
So then what happens as it gets darker?
Then comes sunset, which the text ties to closure. It's a structured reflection on what has just passed as the day officially ends.
A chance to wrap it up mentally.
Yeah. And finally, night, the state of absolute surrender. Letting go of the day entirely.
Surrendering control.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the essay is presenting a core thesis about the nature of time itself.
Which is?
Time is not just an empty container that is passing by. It's something that is entrusted to us.
Entrusted, not just given.
Exactly. The text warns that many people view time as a void. They simply need to fill with activity. But the goal isn't to fill it. The real need is to read it rightly.
Read it rightly. Let me make sure I'm fully grasping this. By assigning these specific psychological states to the times of day, you aren't just dividing the hours.
No, you're doing much more than that.
You're turning the day itself into a map of the entire human experience. Like, you're born at dawn, you hustle and build at midday, you feel your physical limits in the afternoon, you close the chapter at sunset, and you surrender at night.
You got it.
You're essentially rehearsing an entire lifetime in the span of 24 hours.
Yes. And by continually interrupting the flow at those specific markers, you ensure that you aren't just letting that entrusted time wash down the drain unnoticed.
You aren't just surviving the river.
Right. You are regularly stepping onto the bank to check your compass.
Okay, so we've established the mental framework and the chronological map. We know why this pause is necessary, and we understand the mechanics of when it happens.
Right, the structure of it.
But a mental pause usually needs a physical anchor to really work, and the text goes incredibly deep into the physical manifestation of this pause.
It's a very embodied practice.
It really explores how the body actually informs the mind during this process. Like, think about the physical sensation of carrying a heavily loaded backpack all day.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you've ever gone on a long, grueling hike, you know that your body eventually gets used to the weight. You adjust your posture, you lean forward, and you stop realizing how heavy the pack actually is.
You just go numb to it.
Exactly. You only realize the massive burden you've been carrying when you finally get back to the car, take the straps off, and let the backpack drop to the floor.
Oh, that feeling is amazing.
Suddenly your shoulders feel incredibly light, your posture corrects itself, you feel almost weightless.
That physical release you're describing is a crucial part of the mechanism the essay outlines. The mind and the body are not separate. They mirror each other.
But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. From a purely secular, modern standpoint, the specific physical acts described in the text, bowing down and prostration, which means placing one's face and forehead completely on the ground.
Right, the physical postures of the prayer.
Yeah, these look like ultimate acts of defeat. I mean, they have a negative connotation in our highly competitive culture.
They do look like surrender in a negative way.
Right, they imply weakness. They imply giving up or losing the battle against the demands of the day. So how does the text reconcile that physical act of lowering yourself with actually maintaining strength?
It's a great question.
If I'm overwhelmed by my day, how does physically submitting make me stronger?
It reconciles it by challenging our core definition of what makes us heavy and exhausted in the first place.
Okay.
The author explains that when a person bows in this ritual, they're not merely lowering their body in a display of submissive defeat. They're actively releasing their weight.
Oh, like taking off the backpack.
Exactly. They are taking off that heavy backpack you just described. They are setting down their burdens and realigning their place within existence.
And what about the prostration?
Prostration, that act of placing the forehead on the earth, is described as the moment where a person, perhaps for the very first time all day, truly stops.
So the forehead hitting the ground is the physical equivalent of the backpack hitting the floor.
Precisely. And contrary to the idea that this is a sign of weakness, the text explicitly states that this stopping does not weaken a person. It strengthens them.
But how?
Because, as the essay points out, human exhaustion doesn't just come from physical labor. The deepest exhaustion comes from the illusion of trying to control everything around us.
Trying to master the flow of the river.
Right. And you cannot master a river.
No, you definitely can't.
When you try to control every outcome, every email, every interaction, you burn out. Your spiritual muscles give out.
That makes total sense.
But when a person accepts their place, when they physically and mentally surrender the illusion of total control, they become lighter.
The burden drops.
The text puts it beautifully. It says, "You are not the master of the flow, but you are responsible for your direction."
Wow.
The ritual is about knowing how to physically stop so you don't get lost, continually asking yourself the anchoring question, where did you come from and where are you going?
That distinction between mastering the flow versus owning your direction is huge.
It changes everything.
Because you aren't responsible for the fact that the rapids exist. The chaos of life, the unexpected crises, the demanding boss, that is the water, and you don't control it.
Nope, you can't control the water.
But you are entirely responsible for steering the boat. And sometimes, steering the boat requires you to pull over to the bank and drop your heavy gear so you can navigate better.
Exactly. And this physical and temporal reorientation, it naturally triggers a profound internal transformation.
Yes, and this is where our source material transitions from the philosophical essay into this really striking poem.
Right, a conversation of the heart.
Yeah.
The poem is essential because it shows us the psychological results of this practice.
It takes it from theory to reality.
Exactly. If the essay gives us the theory, the mechanics, and the schedule, the poem gives us the lived internal experience of someone who is actually engaged in this practice. It maps out the inner landscape.
There's a specific couplet in the poem that really stood out to me.
Oh, which one?
The narrator says, "I spoke your name upon my lips, yet self was in disguise. If justice is not within me, the fault in my own voice lies."
That is such a powerful line.
It is such a brilliant, piercing call-out of hypocrisy. It reminds me of putting a shiny, brand new bumper sticker on a car that has a completely blown-out engine.
A great analogy. The outside looks fine, but it doesn't run.
Right. It doesn't matter how perfect the external ritual looks. It doesn't matter if you stop 5 times a day and go through the physical motions of bowing and prostrating, if the internal mechanics of the heart are busted.
The physical motion isn't enough on its own.
Right. And if you're listening to this on your commute, you might be thinking, what does justice within me have to do with being stressed out by my daily flow?
It seems like a leap.
So how does the poem expand on this idea of internal alignment versus just putting on an external illusion?
The poem breaks that down by detailing a profound shift in perspective that has to happen internally for the pause to actually work.
Okay, what kind of shift?
Well, as you said, the physical bowing is just empty choreography if the heart doesn't also bow. The poem addresses this internal justice in a few key ways, primarily through the lens of how we view our possessions and how we view our blessings.
How does it talk about possessions?
On the topic of possessions and control, the narrator arrives at this realization. They say, "All I claimed as mine was fleeting, a trust within my hand not to rule, but to be faithful. This I came to understand."
Not to rule, but to be faithful. Man, that loops right back to the idea of the backpack and the illusion of control we discussed.
It ties it all together perfectly.
We cause our own suffering because we think we need to rule over our domain.
We do. We think we own the things we carry, our titles, our bank accounts, our status, our plans for the future.
But we don't really own them.
No, the poem suggests that in reality, we are just managing them for a very short time. They're a trust.
Just a trust.
When you realize you don't have to rule over these things, but merely be faithful with them, the anxiety of the flow significantly decreases.
That takes so much pressure off.
And from there, the poem tackles an incredible psychological truth about gratitude versus a scarcity mindset.
Oh, this part is so good.
Listen to the mechanics in these lines. "I counted all that I was missing, and my heart grew tight inside. Then I noticed just one blessing, and something in me opened wide."
The way the poet describes the physical sensation of scarcity is so accurate.
Heart grew tight inside.
Yes. My heart grew tight inside when focusing on what is lacking. That is so universally recognizable.
We've all felt it.
Because if you sit around counting the promotions you didn't get, the money you don't have, or the time you're losing, scarcity literally physically constricts your chest. It triggers a stress response.
And conversely, gratitude physically opens you. Something in me opened wide.
It's a visceral reaction.
It's a biological and spiritual reality reflected beautifully in the text. The pause allows the mind to shift from the tightness of scarcity to the openness of gratitude.
Which is huge.
And this raises an important question, which the poem also brings up. How often do we pass blindly by the clear signs all around us because we are moving too fast?
Oh, wow.
The poem states, "Night and day, the earth and heavens, each a sign so clear the blind passed on, but those who saw felt meaning drawing near."
The blind passed on.
Yeah, the overwhelming nature of the flow makes us functionally blind. The pause is the mechanism that allows us to actually see the signs, to observe our reality, and to feel that meaning drawing near.
The flow makes us blind. That really hits the nail on the head.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and synthesize this whole journey we've been on with this text, the core message is incredibly empowering.
It's a very hopeful message.
This essay and this poem are not telling you to withdraw from modern life. They aren't saying that having a busy schedule is inherently evil or that you need to go live in a remote cabin in the woods to find peace.
No, it's very practical for the modern person.
Instead, the text defines this ritual practice of prayer as a return to life, rightly placed.
Rightly placed.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that you are drifting and then using structured, deeply intentional pauses to step out of the rapids.
Getting out of the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about taking that physical moment to set down the heavy illusion of control and doing the internal work to shift your posture from scarcity to gratitude.
It's transformative.
As the poem's final couplet suggests, it is about hearing a call in the heart and returning within.
It serves as a highly systematic, tested method for not losing yourself to the relentless demands of the world. It is the ultimate anchor.
The ultimate anchor, exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to pose a few questions directly to you, the listener.
I think they need to hear this.
Think about your own flow today. Think about the momentum of your week right now. How heavy is the burden of control that you're carrying on your shoulders at this very moment?
It's probably heavier than you think.
Are you just moving on the treadmill, or do you actually know your direction? Are you reading the time you've been entrusted with, or are you just desperately trying to fill it with noise?
Those are the exact penetrating questions the text wants us to confront.
They really are.
And to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Building on everything we have explored from this material,
Let's hear it.
the essay focuses intensely on how we must stop to escape the overwhelming flow of life. But consider this. What if the true measure of our freedom isn't our ability to move wherever we want within the current, but our capacity to willingly bring ourselves to a complete and total stop?